Wait, did The Flash actually just deliver a good episode this season? Let's find out.
King Shark versus Gorilla Grodd? Are you kidding me?
So yes guys, welcome to the review for The Flash Season 5 Episode 15, otherwise entitled King Shark vs Gorilla Grodd. This is an episode that has been teared up since the premiere of this season. We've been waiting for it, and it is finally here. And while I thought this episode was going to be complete and utter filler and a complete waste of time, this is actually ending up, while still being filler, one of the best episodes that this season has delivered thus far. So let's just talk about King Shark for a minute, because King Shark is a big part of this episode. Now, we've never really delved too deep into King Shark as a character thus far on The Flash at all. We've had him in Season 2, he came back in Season 3 for an episode, and we haven't really seen him since, except for that, unless you count that brief appearance in Crisis on Earth X. So we haven't really seen him properly in a while, and I have to say that the writers did a fantastic job of humanizing this character, because we've never actually seen kind of what this character is actually like. He's always just been this big CGI monster, but now we actually get to see that there is a lot more humanity behind this character, because the main sort of thing going on in this episode is that the metahuman cure is now ready, and they need a test subject, and that test subject is King Shark, and we actually get to see King Shark transform back into his regular human form. And again, this added a lot more humanity to King Shark and actually added a lot of depth to him, which, you know, that was something he was severely lacking at this point. And I think that this really did a good job of just showing that this guy had a lot more to him beneath the surface, or beneath the gills, if you will. They also brought back Tanya Landon in this episode, who was in one episode of Season 2. They recast the actress because obviously they wanted to give her a bit more of a substantial role in this episode, and she was also really good. And what I have to commend the writers for as well is actually creating a pretty viable romance between these two characters, because it turns out that the person that is King Shark, it's actually the Earth 2 doppelganger of Tanya Landon's dead lover. And I think that was actually really interesting, because they had this kind of connection where Tanya Landon really wanted to help this guy because, you know, he resembles the person that she loved. And I thought, again, they actually did a really good job of, you know, in the space of 40 minutes, actually delivering a pretty decent love story that's much better than some of the other ones that the Arrowverse has done over multiple seasons. I think they did a really good job of establishing this and just finishing it pretty quickly. Also, we actually have Audrey Marie Anderson in this episode as Lila, of course, coming over from Arrow. I love Lila so much. I mean, if you've seen my reviews, you would have known. I always have to mention when Lila's in an episode, just because I love her. I think she's amazing. And just seeing her in this episode again was really awesome. I love it when she comes over to The Flash. It would have been cool maybe if we had Diggle in this episode as well, but either way, we got Lila, and I loved her in this episode, as I always do. So anyway, Grodd shows up, and this is where he starts wreaking some havoc. Grodd actually isn't in this episode that much. I thought he was going to be in it a bit more, but he's actually got a pretty minimal role within the episode itself. But he actually broke out of Argus, and basically the reason how they explain this is basically during the Enlightenment at the end of Season 4, the security went down for 1 second, which was just enough time for Grodd to manipulate a guard to let him out. Now, this did kind of feel a bit convenient for me. I didn't like the fact that they were like, oh yeah, the security went down for 1 second. It was just 1 second before the backup came up, but that was just enough time for Grodd to manipulate a guy to let him out of prison and for him to escape. That was a little bit convenient for me, but they needed a way to explain how Grodd got out, and that's how he got out, so whatever. It's not perfect. It's not the best piece of writing in the world, but whatever, I can deal with it. Now, because Grodd is now out there terrorizing Central City, King Shark actually comes up with the idea that he wants to turn back into King Shark in order to take down Grodd, because he basically comes up with the decision that, yes, I'm really the only person who can take Grodd down. None of you guys have ever really been that successful in doing it before. I can turn into a bigger hulking monster than Grodd himself, because King Shark is actually a lot bigger than Grodd, and you actually get to see that in this episode. I always thought Grodd was bigger, or at least they're around the same size, but like King Shark is a lot bigger than Grodd. But we also get to get that really awesome dilemma where, you know, he basically says, look, just let me turn back into King Shark and I'll take down him, you know, as a way of reforming, you know, for all the bad things I've done thus far in his life. And I thought that was actually really interesting, the fact he was able to repent and actually want to reform himself by turning back into King Shark and saving the citizens of Central City. I thought that was actually a really nice plot point. And they also bring up the idea of, oh, well, if you turn back into King Shark, you'll never be able to turn back into your human form again, and he's willing to take that sacrifice to stop Grodd. I think that was actually a really nice plot point. It's something that went really well within the arc of this character within this episode. Of course, this whole episode was kind of building towards this big CGI fight between Grodd and King Shark, and as far as big TV CGI, just fights go, this was pretty good. I mean, this actually looked fantastic for TV on this budget. Like, obviously, it's not going to look as good as a Hollywood movie would, but it just, for TV and for The Flash, this looked really good. I was really impressed with everything they brought here. I just thought Grodd looked great, King Shark looked great, and them actually fighting together, it didn't look like a bunch of just CGI mess on the screen. Like, you could actually clearly see what was going on. You could see Grodd, you could see King Shark, and you could actually see who was throwing the punches. And I think it actually looked fantastic. I was really impressed with all that. And the way they actually used science in this episode as well, that when King Shark is hanging upside down from the thing that makes him unconscious, because if you actually do that with a shark, they become unconscious. I thought, well done, Team Flash, for actually using science for once. They actually use science in this episode, which Team Flash, given the fact that they are a team of scientists, they don't use science that often. So it was really nice to actually see them do that. And again, this fight, it was obviously, this is where a lot of the budget of this season has gone, clearly. But it just, I think, was it worth it? Maybe not necessarily in regards to the story, but was it a fun scene? Absolutely. And we do have another side story going on in this episode where we actually finally get the return of Jesse L. Martin as Joe West. It was so nice to have Joe back this episode. I have missed him so dearly. We all love Jesse L. Martin, and he's just so good on this show. So having Joe back was a great delight. Obviously, the actor who portrays him, Jesse L. Martin, did actually have a back injury earlier on in the season, and that's why he's been missing for a while, but he's now back. And they do explain that he's been in Tibet with Wally, so they kind of cover Wally as well. Also, just a quick question. When are we getting Wally back this season? Like, I'm pretty sure I read the news ages ago that Keenan Lonsdale was scheduled for 3 episodes this season. He's only been in the premiere, so when's Wally showing back up again? Can we get that answered, please? Because I need Wally back on the show. But anyway, it was nice to have Wally actually mentioned and actually have some kind of story coverage there that came with Joe coming back home. And again, I just love that. And this whole storyline with Joe and Iris, like, although it was kind of separate from everything else that was going on, like very, very separate, I still thought it was actually really nice because it was good character moments between Joe and Iris, something we haven't had for a while, and Joe is actually helping Iris kind of cope with the idea of Cicada and how he's kind of been hunting them all down. So I actually quite like the fact that they just had these two characters just separated from everything else and just had this little personal story that actually worked really well as a nice little side offering. It was actually really nice in this episode to actually just take a step away from the main storyline, because yes, this episode is pretty much, for the most part, filler. There is some links with the metahuman cure, there are some things like that, but for the most part this episode is pretty filler. But I have to say, it was actually really refreshing, because this season has been so heavy-handed with Cicada and so heavy-handed with that particular storyline. To take a break from that and just to have some fun and just to actually have some just big CGI fighting with King Shark and Gorilla Grodd. Again, filler, but it was just a nice, refreshing episode, and again, it felt really fun. It felt like the writers and the cast actually really wanted to make this episode and just have some fun with it, and it came through that way. Nora was actually a side character in this episode, not the main character, so she was actually alright in this episode. All the drama, I forgot to mention the drama between Barry, Caitlin, and Cisco was actually really good in this episode. Like, actually real issues they were tackling worked really well, and I think the Joe and Iris stuff was really good. And I also noticed an interesting parallel. Like, this is episode 15 of season 5. If you remember back to last season, episode 15 of season 4, we got Enter Flash Time, and Enter Flash Time was also a completely filler episode, but I think most fans will agree that Enter Flash Time was the best episode of season 4 of The Flash. So I think it's quite interesting that now in episode 15 of season 5 we get this episode, and is potentially, arguably, the best episode of the season. So who knows? But overall, great episode of The Flash. It's been awesome to just kind of have this episode and to give me some faith back in this season. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of DC Central. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And I hope to see you guys again next time.